So we've got a couple of questions for you on Mentimeter, which would be great if you can join in. So the first one is, what green job are you looking for? So you can either scan the QR code, or Frankie will put in the chat the Mentimeter code.
Yeah, so feel free to just copy and paste that into your web browser as a quicker shortcut into getting into the Mentimeter as well.
We'll give you a few minutes to find out your QR code. So there's lots coming in already. So conservation officer, conservation, ecologist, rewilding, wildlife conservation, renewable energy, marine careers, sustainable resources, policy advisor. That's an interesting one because actually the number of policy roles has increased quite dramatically over the last few years. Art and nature, fantastic. I often say it's not STEM, it's STEAM. So we're getting art into science, technology, art and maths as well.
Yeah, some really interesting ones in there.
So ecologist is coming out as a popular one, wildlife management. But I think what we'll find tonight when we go and progress, it's the number and diversity of roles has increased quite dramatically, even in the last 5 years. So it's really interesting to see all these different job roles that are coming up. Okay, well, that's a fantastic selection. Thank you for taking part in that. So we'll move on to the next one, which should just come up on your screen. So what has been your biggest barrier to finding a green job? Yep. Geographic location can be a real challenge. Where you live is not obviously always where the opportunities are available, whether that's rural or within urban areas, actually. Lack of internships, yeah. Non-driver, that's one that we hear a lot, actually. Obviously, while you're studying or leaving schools, you don't potentially have the money, the opportunity to learn to drive, and many jobs in this sector do require you to have a driving license. So it is a barrier, certainly for many people. It's one we commonly hear. Not knowing where to look, yes, that's a good one. It's one that we hear often. Okay, well, thank you so much for taking part in that. That will help us frame some of the discussions and the Q&A later on in the session. I'll actually start my presentation now. And so my name is Annie Robinson. I work for CIEM, which is the Chartered Institute for Ecology and Environmental Management, a long title, hence why we say CIEM. So I am actually based in Scotland. I'm the project officer in Scotland, but I also work on the Green Jobs for Nature project. So I wanted to introduce that to you today, hopefully as a resource that you can all get involved with and hopefully find useful. Many of you know we are facing a twin environmental crisis, both for biodiversity loss and climate change, and these are very much interlinked. But the challenge is we've not got enough people working in the industry. We need to raise awareness of the opportunities of Green Jobs for Nature. And we are particularly in this project focusing on the nature side of green jobs. Sometimes when people refer to green jobs, the focus is very much on renewables. So we are really highlighting the importance of nature-related jobs. There's a lack of awareness of the career opportunities. As I said before, there's lots of jobs. I can certainly say for like peatland restoration in Scotland, a lot of these jobs did not exist until the last 5 to 10 years. And also, how do you get those jobs? You see all these adverts for jobs, but how do you get from your CV to get in that position? There is a skill shortage in the sector, and I'll show you a little bit later on. But we need more young people and mature career changes as well, which is something that we are seeing in the sector, which is fantastic, to join and get a Green Jobs for Nature. We need people from underrepresented backgrounds. Ecology and environmental management is really not doing well in terms of diversity and inclusion. It's been rated as the second least diverse sector. So as part of this project, we're trying to raise awareness and opening up the opportunities to promote diversity and inclusion with both employers, but also raising awareness of people entering the sector. There are also some misconceptions of the industry. We can talk a bit about volunteering and low pay. So it's trying to improve the options that are available. Central to the project is the development of a website, the Green Jobs for Nature website. It covers what a green job is, how to get one, who you can work for. So if you want to become an ecologist, a conservation worker, work in media, comms, there's a section on each of those that you can look on and find more information. But also, who are the employers? You know, often we think of the sort of charity, the environmental NGO sector, but also public sector employers, private sector, industry, academia. So it will tell you a little bit about all the different sectors as well. What's quite unique and probably the most useful part is we have a library of job profiles. Now, these have been submitted by people working in the sector. We've got more than 150 different profiles, and I'll be asking all the speakers if they haven't done one to submit their own profile as well. But you can search by category, so say conservation workers or ecologists. There's a search bar, so say if you're interested in marine careers, you could just type in marine and it will come up with all the related profiles to marine. But what is a profile? So I've just selected one here. So each of them are fairly similar. What sector you work in, how long you've been working in Green Job for Nature, a salary range, that's not compulsory, but a lot of people have done it. And we felt it was important to display that because, for example, if you have caring responsibilities, you might not be able to work in a low paid position. So we felt it was important to be transparent wherever possible. Describe the work that you do, what you like about your job, but as important, what you dislike. It's always good to find out the likes and, you know, some of the challenges within positions. What inspired you into the career? What challenges you faced in getting a position or progressing your career? The education training you've got, and what advice you would offer for someone coming into the profession. And actually it's that section that's really interesting. So for example, this person has said, don't put restrictions on yourself when applying for jobs. The perfect candidate described in a job role really doesn't exist. I think for most of us, if we're honest and we looked at our own job descriptions, the essential and desirable categories, we probably do not tick them all. So don't put barriers in your place before applying. So as I say, these are all people that have spent 5-10 minutes submitting a job profile for the benefit of others. Also on the website is the fairly standard stuff, so how to get a degree in Jobs for Nature, looking at entry routes, apprenticeships, degrees, advice for careers changes, useful resources. We've also got a whole series of blogs and events that we post as well, so you can have a look at those. Just to highlight, we commissioned last autumn a report joint with Lantra on opening up vocational pathways into nature-based green jobs. There's a QR code there if you want to scan. But I just want to highlight, we asked employers what skills do graduates have, but also what skills do graduates need to develop. That was 2 of them, so you can look at the report and see the results for that. But here we asked students 3 things they wish they had done as part of their degree or college courses. And what's really interesting is that some of these things, like species identification, ecological survey skills, were what was also coming up from the employer perspective. So do have a look at that report if of interest. And I'm going to finish up there because we've got just 5 minutes each. So just want to highlight greenjobsfornature.org. You can find it. We've got a link tree where you can find all of our social media accounts. We're on Instagram and TikTok. And we feature new blogs. So we've just got one that we've posted on mature career changes, and another one that looking at what would I tell my younger self from an associate ecologist. So it's all being updated all the time. So have a look and see what you can find useful on the site. I'm going to stop sharing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Annie. So Annie and I are co-hosting this webinar together, Annie on behalf of CIEM and Green Jobs for Nature. And I myself am coming in on behalf of UK Youth for Nature. So UK Youth for Nature are the leading UK youth movement that are calling for urgent action on the nature crisis. But their core mission is to mobilise and empower young people to be able to seek and call for decisive action on nature and wildlife in the UK, as we are facing the twin biodiversity and climate crises. But obviously, in order to do that, we need to be able to train the next generation of environmental leaders. And the ultimate vision is to increase the visibility of nature in all decision making, raise political awareness about the loss of nature and wildlife in the 4 countries of the UK, and then hopefully secure a more nature-filled future. And from a personal perspective, I am also currently looking for a green job for nature. So when the opportunity came to host this webinar, I thought this would be a great opportunity myself to learn. So just for everyone who's part of the call to know, I'm in the exact same boat as a lot of you guys. I'm equally as keen to hear from the panelists and how they went about their respective journeys. So we'll go through them one by one, and we'll intro everyone as we go along. So we're going to be starting with Diego, who is coming from Voice Academy and hopefully sharing his broader expertise. But yeah, I'll let him take over now.
Hi, thanks, Francesca, and thanks for inviting me to this. First of all, I want to say that I've trained as an environmental engineer when I was an undergraduate a little while ago, and I always envied the ecology people because I thought it was more fun than environmental engineering, but haven't gotten over that yet. But anyway, and then I went on to I played a bunch of roles in business, so I'm basically coming from a business perspective. I've been an investor. I worked at a series of asset management firms and investment banks. I've been a strategy consultant. I worked at BCG, and I've also been an impact entrepreneur, in the healthcare sector and also in where I am now, which is climate and ESG. And then I've been an educator. I've taught in the classroom, actually more finance related courses before I went into climate. So what does all this say? What it says, I think, for you is have your mind open to your career trajectory, because you could do lots of pivots in your career. And oftentimes you don't end up where you thought you were going to end up. And for me, it was a quite circuitous route to come back and do something where I really have impact on the planet. It took me a long time, but here I am. And so what I do now at Voice Academy is we help professionals upskill and also through career coaching navigate career transitions towards climate and ESG. And so we're all about helping people prepare for jobs and prepare for careers in these sectors. So I want to talk a little bit about focus on corporations. So I'm kind of the corporate guy here. And basically, it's a little bit different. And I had to train myself about this, that people that work in corporations on sustainability and conservation and things like that, they are solving the planet's problems, but secondarily, but primarily solving corporations' problems when it comes to stakeholders demanding that they do things for the planet. Subtly different, but really important distinction. So at Voice Academy, we're all about being problem solvers. So how do we train people to be problem solvers? So what we encourage people to do as they think about corporate sector jobs is, how do you solve problems for the corporate sector in a way that also solves problems for the planet? So that's what I'm trying to do. That's what most of our participants want to do. And so you do it internally, working inside the company as a consultant or as a vendor to the company. So now I'll go through kind of examples and what those different roles mean within a corporation. So first, I want to say that corporations are the main way that humans trip planetary boundaries. Okay, so what we do as consumers or individuals doesn't come close to the organized decision-making of especially large corporations and the impact that they have on the planet. So, there's 8 billion humans, but the 8 billion humans organized into productive activity is where most of the impact happens, okay? And so what that means is that corporations are going to be held to task as we near tripping planetary boundaries, and we're near or are actively tripping quite a few of them. And so these include climate change, water scarcity, biodiversity loss, soil erosion, not a complete list, right? And so what's happening is, as corporations trigger these boundaries, then stakeholders basically are demanding that something be done about that. And very often they demand that corporations outpace the level at which governments are requiring things of them. So independent of governments, they want corporations to act. And so as inside corporations, that means there's a role which basically, as a sustainability analyst, is a person that measures the impact that the company is having, designs initiatives to reduce that impact, supports the execution of those initiatives across the whole company and the supply chain, and even downstream towards the use and post-use, reports out everything that's happening, and then helps market the progress that's being made. So if you're working inside of a company doing sustainability work, these are the different activities that you're engaged in. If you're coming from an ecology background, realize that a part of the job is going to have the dimension of biodiversity and soil erosion and different things that have to do with ecology, but there's broader expectations of you. So very often roles kind of require you to stretch outside the things that you're specifically preparing for and learn new dimensions of sustainability, and that's true here. So that's inside companies. Nature-related consultants are helping corporations basically deal with the biodiversity impact that they have. So it could be a food company that has palm oil plantations that's having a big impact on rainforest ecologies. And so consultants are being called in to kind of quantify that impact, because that's beyond the skill set of the people inside the companies. So conservation initiatives, the company may be engaging in conservation initiatives directly in the locations where it's operating, or promoting conservation elsewhere to kind of defray the impact that it's having. Regenerative ag is a really, really big topic, and you might not think that this is nature-based, but it's basically introducing nature-based concepts, ecological concepts, back into the growing of food for 8 billion people on the planet. So this is a really, really big area where nature-based solutions are being implemented. Companies like Pepsi say that they are basically want to have nature-based regenerative agriculture over 7 million acres, right? Really, really big initiatives, and they need a lot of help in doing this kind of thing. And so you could also be a vendor to a company. What I mean by that is you're producing some kind of service or product to the company so it could be more sustainable. So for instance, you can be helping offset providers manage conservation projects. The whole offset concept has a lot of controversy and everything, but the idea is that by promoting conservation outside of its operations, by investing in it through offset credits, corporations can kind of offset the stuff that they do that's having negative impact. And so there's a lot of work to be done in trying to manage conservation projects all over the world, because if corporations wanted to offset all of the bad impact that they did, there's just not even enough room in the planet for the conservation projects that would be necessary to do that. So this is a growth area and an important area. Data and mapping that's associated with that, to introduce technology into conservation. And then even things like alternative energy, where we can think about climate impact is basically nature impact. And so how do we have biofuels kind of improve ecologies and also minimize the impact on nature and climate change? And then software providers. So on the vendor side, there's all kinds of things going on. There's all kinds of growth and investment happening. So I think what a lot of these have in common, that I would leave you with this idea, is that think about what you do well and what you know about as your base or your foundation to work in sustainability. But it helps if you're willing to step out of that and go into different directions to solve problems, and you can learn quickly in order to do those things. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
No, Diego, that was really, really great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, definitely, like you said, I think a big part of the nature-related roles is that, you know, there's a lot of lingo to learn, there's a lot of different niches, and hopefully the Green Jobs for Nature platform is also going to help with understanding all that variability and just learning what the different terms mean. But I appreciate 5 minutes is short. So again, anyone who has any questions, feel free to make a note of them either in the chat box or personally, and we'll be able to dive in a little bit deeper with the panelists in a bit. But in the meantime, I'm going to be handing over to Caitlin Turner, who is joining us from the Sustainable Inshore Fisheries Trust. And yeah, she'll be able to tell us a little bit more about what her work involves as well. So I'll just mute myself again. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you. Just 2 seconds to find my tab. I always have far too many tabs open on my computer, and then I can never find the one that I just had open for screen sharing. Where have you gone? Why are you not opening? Bear with me. It's only coming up with a different one. This worked earlier, and now as soon as I want it to work, it's deciding it doesn't want to. There we go. Hopefully we're here and you can see it, and I'll just get it full screen from the first page. Nothing ever goes smoothly on the moment, does it? But anyway, here we are. I'm used to it by now. Yes, thank you for having me. As Frankie said, my name is Caitlin. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm 24 as of last month. I'm going to kind of be quite honest about where I am in my job journey and what I've done, and what I'm currently doing in my roles, just in case there's things that you're maybe sitting out there and you can relate to see like where my journey's gone, and that you feel personally about any other stage that I've gone through. My current position is a policy officer for the Sustainable Inshore Fisheries Trust. So I know it was mentioned earlier in the kind of what jobs are you looking at? Somebody I think in there had said something to do with policy. So hopefully this will give you a little bit of an insight into what I'm up to. Yeah, so my personal background, first of all, I grew up in a landlocked rural town in East Ayrshire. It's a tiny wee place called Darvel. Nobody really knows about it, but it was the birthplace of Sir Alexander Fleming. But I was nowhere near the sea. I think the closest beach to us was about a 40-minute drive. But still, when it was summertime, my parents would take me out to the beach when they could, and that's where I really fell in love with the ocean, and decided at that point that I wanted to be a mermaid until I got older and realised that wasn't really a viable career option. So marine biology was the next best thing. I do come from a low-income background, and that's been the same way throughout my life, and that's in part because I am a young carer to my mum, who's disabled, and that's been, since I was little, that's always been my role. So I've always faced that as a barrier throughout my journey, going through education and on into my career. I went to high school in another rural town, so I'm not having much luck with getting anywhere near the sea as someone that wanted to be a marine biologist. And then when I completed my studies at high school, I went on to the University of Stirling to study marine biology. Stirling is also not the closest place to the sea, but slightly closer. But anyway, and I graduated from there in 2022, which now seems like forever ago, but also not quite. So my professional background, because as I mentioned, I came from a low-income background, I was working 2 part-time jobs in retail while I was at university in my final year. So trying to balance that alongside my dissertation, and I'll talk about my voluntary work that I did at the same time as working these 2 jobs and my studies and everything else, just to try and get by. And I actually have only now come to realise in the stage that I'm at in my professional journey that even though I was working in retail and I was selling clothes to people, I actually learned quite a lot of very useful skills then that are now applicable to my roles today, now that I work in policy, which you wouldn't really make that connection at first instance, but it's there. And you can see that when you look at jobs that are out there and what kind of requirements that they're looking for. I was then very lucky to be hired by Seafish, who is a public body for the fishing industry, as a fisheries project officer within their fisheries management team. And I was helping with creating the UK's first fisheries management plans for crab, lobster, and whelk at that point. So we were working with DEFRA to be able to pull these together. They are now live. But it's really cool to see that document out there and to know that I was sitting behind the scenes editing it and helping to pull it together, even if DEFRA put their badge on it and didn't mention Seafish or me. But anyway, I know that I did it. But then I left Seafish. I wasn't actually there for very long, and I came to work for SIFT as their policy officer. And I'm now developing and advocating for policies affecting Scottish seas, particularly our inshore waters. So I actually moved from a public body to an NGO, and the reason for that was because my background is largely conservation, and in a public body there was kind of some conflicts of interest coming up, and I couldn't do a lot of the advocacy that I was previously doing, and that I now can continue to do in my role with SIFT. So it's just something to bear in mind when you look at the types of organisations where jobs are based and where your kind of what your interests and passions are. I did a lot of volunteer work, as I mentioned. So these are just some of the photos. I started my university's Marine Conservation Society. I volunteer for the Marine Conservation Society. We are not the same thing. We are not affiliated, but that's a student society that I had at uni. Went over to Sri Lanka and volunteered at a sea turtle sanctuary, but that was through fundraising while at high school and dressing up like a sea turtle in all my classes and begging my teachers to give me some money. That's the only way I could manage that. I am a marine mammal medic for British Divers Marine Life Rescue, and I also sit on the steering group for the Sea Scotland conference, which we're organising year on year, and I'm a trustee for Young Sea Changers Scotland, who is a new organisation, a new youth policy focused organisation up here in Scotland. And there's so much more, but I don't have enough time to go into it in this. So some of my sort of top tips to have got me where I am as a young person that's still keeping my eye on the whole job sphere as well, because I'm still figuring out my true path and where my interests lie, is to research what kind of jobs it is that you're interested in. There are so many out there across the environmental spectrum, from policy to the more in the field collecting data things. And there are websites that I used to religiously check, like Environment Job or Conservation Careers, to see what the current openings were and to get an idea of what skills they're looking for. So do jobs need you to have skills in R? Do they want you to have things in QGIS and things like that? Or is it mostly, as I mentioned, skills like you're able to communicate with people very well, like you might get from a retail job? If you have the time and capacity, and that is a big if that I've had to learn the hard way, look into volunteering for organisations, preferably the ones that are free to join, because obviously pay to go and do things like my big Sri Lanka sea turtle thing, not accessible to everyone, especially if you're from a low income background. But there are plenty like the MCS, for example, that are free to join. And there's lots of different work you can do, from public engagement to organising beach cleans and things. And that you can do in your own time, so you can work around what other commitments you've got going on. It's great for building CVs and crucially also for building a network. That's like my number one thing, is to try and build a network, because it can take you anywhere. It opens so many doors. And my final thing is just to keep going, but to remember to look after yourself. So don't do what I did in my final year of uni and say yes to absolutely everything out of sheer panic that you're not going to get anywhere. Look after yourself, because you don't want to burn out. You can only be the best sort of advocate and best self that you can be for the environment and care for it if you are actually looking after yourself in the first instance. If you get rejections, they can hurt and they can knock your confidence. I don't know how many I had before I landed one at Seafish, but something will eventually come through in the end. And if you can request feedback from your CV or from your interview if possible, then do so, because it can really help for going forwards. And just don't give up. Try not to give up on it. But if you do need to take a break from applications, then please do so. Put your well-being above all else. And that's it from me. And there's my socials on the screen if you want to follow me and everything.
Thank you, Caitlin. That was amazing. As someone who is also a marine biologist and in that kind of journey, I think it's the barriers that you mentioned and stuff, I think are really, really important, because everyone is coming from such a different place of what their barriers might be. But I think being really open about that and sharing what it is that you face can really help other people to know, oh, that person's in the same boat as me. And they also know it was not a straight shot at just getting a job. Like, there are so many twists and turns, and that gets resonated by everyone I speak to. So no, thank you so much for sharing that. So the next person I'll be handing over to is Anna L. And she's joining us from the Carbon Trust. So again, I'll let her take a time just to screen share or just to speak. And yeah, we'll learn a little bit more about what she does as well.
Great. Thank you, Frankie. 1 second while I get my screen sorted. Here we go. All right. So hi, everyone. My name's Anna L. Gomez. I am originally from Spain, but I'm working in London at the Carbon Trust, and I'm a senior analyst, but I'm going to speak about how I got into sustainability consulting in the first place. So I graduated with a bachelor's in business management in 2021 and had little work experience under my belt. Upon graduating, I wasn't very sure what exactly I wanted to do, except that I did want my day-to-day job to give me a sense of purpose. And as cringy as it sounds, I also wanted to have some sort of positive impact on the planet. And so even though I didn't have a sustainability background, it is something that I've always been interested in and passionate about. So given my background and skill set, I figured sustainability consulting would be a good career path to pursue, to learn about the space and also have an impact. So I began doing research into sustainability consulting firms, and the Carbon Trust really stood out to me.
Anna, can you just put it on full screen?
Yeah, sorry, I just couldn't.
Just so I can see the slide clear. Thank you.
Don't
worry, no, if not, it's fine.
Perfect. There we go.
Wonderful.
So, apologies. So the Carbon Trust is a sustainability consultancy with 20 years of experience in climate action, and they partner with leading businesses, governments, and financial institutions to accelerate their route to net zero. Their work includes target setting and feasibility, developing net zero pathways, assurance and footprinting, policy advice, strategy setting, and much more. They were made up of 400 experts with offices in the UK, the Netherlands, South Africa, China, Singapore, and Mexico. And most importantly, their mission is to accelerate the move to a decarbonized future. So I checked their careers page online, but they didn't have an opening, so I signed up to their job alerts. And in the meantime, I tried to upskill based on the job descriptions I had been coming across. So I knew data analytics was really important, so I did some Excel courses and some introductory coding boot camps online. And then I also just generally tried to stay up to date in terms of sustainability news, so looking at major commitments made by companies, looking at studies as well as publications of new regulations. And then a couple weeks later, I got notified that an internship became available at the Carbon Trust. So I applied, and it just involved sending my CV as well as a cover letter. And then I got invited to an interview, which I prepped by doing research on the company's work and looking at projects that I found interesting, and looking at the company's values as well, and prepping examples of how I've demonstrated these values in the past. And then I also jotted down questions that I'd like to ask the recruiter if I got the chance during the interview. And then the interview itself was with a recruiter and the business services director. So the internship was for corporate advisory, which is business services in the Carbon Trust. And we essentially went through my experience and I got asked some competency questions, and why I wanted to join CT and what value I brought to the table. And then I also had the chance to ask them some questions too, such as the type, how many projects you tend to be at on at once, just to see how I would have to manage and sort of adapt from being a university student to starting a first full-time job. And so once the interview had concluded, a couple days later, I was notified that I got the job, and then started 2 weeks later. So it was a very quick turnaround. And overall, I really enjoyed the 6-month internship. I am still working there 2 years later. It was a very steep learning curve, and I got a lot of responsibility and exposure early on. I worked on multiple client projects across different sectors, but mainly in the ICT sector, as that's where my interests lie. And a lot of interns who joined at the same time as me were coming from varying experience levels. So it wasn't just recent grads, you had PhD students, you had professionals pivoting in their career, and people re-entering the workforce, which really enriched my internship, knowing that other people are going through the same journey as you, and we just all became very close. And to wrap things up, my advice would be to do your research on the company you're applying for, prepare an upskill where you can, be vocal about your interests during the interview, as well as once you get the job, and seek opportunities that align with these. And then don't be afraid to ask questions, ask for feedback, and also reach out to professionals in positions you see that are interesting to you and where you would like to see yourself, to understand how they got there. Thank you, and apologies for the technical issues.
Not at all, Anna. You rectified them very, very quickly. So that's great. And I echo that. I think reaching out to people that are in the positions that you're interested in is a really, really powerful thing to do. It's something I've been testing out a lot, and it's amazing how generous people are with their time. So definitely recommend that one. So yeah, so to basically bring us to our final panelist, we're going to be speaking with Ellery. So she is going to be telling us a little bit more about her work with the Scottish Seabird Centre and her journey to getting what many I think would describe as a dream job as well. Looking forward to hearing this one.
So hello everyone. As Frankie mentioned, my name's Ellery and I work as a seagrass officer in Scotland. I'm going to speak about the things that I believe helped me get me to where I am today. So this is me and my brother in 2010 in the Red Sea at Ras Mohammed National Park, and this is where I spent a lot of time growing up. But funnily enough, marine biology was never something that came on my radar until I actually spoke to one of my friends who mentioned that marine biology was a topic. I came from a similar pipeline to Caitlin, where I grew up in a rural working class background. And marine biology was never something that had been pitched to me at school or going out to these sort of environments. So it wasn't really until then that I thought I could go ahead and study it. I did my NICE biological expedition whilst I was still at school. I got my PADI qualification whilst I was out here with an organisation that I'm sure many people will be familiar with, Operation Wallacea. I really enjoyed this, and this was really something that opened my eyes to working as an ecologist and the types of things that you can get into through studying biology and marine biology. So it was actually after this trip that I actually started to look into a career in marine biology. So I went to Newcastle University to study marine biology, where Frankie went also. And this is where I gained my whole cohort of usual skills. So the typical field skills, research skills, and I also conducted a 2-week placement whilst I was at university. I also completed my dissertation and got a whole load of research and writing skills through that. And following on from that, in between my 2nd and 3rd year, I actually went to do an internship with an organisation called the Firth of Forth Lobster Hatchery. And this was a nice opportunity for me to really put the skills I'd learned at university into place. I think this was quite a huge stepping stone for me, because this was actually typical work experience in the field rather than just volunteering. I was treated as a member of staff and given responsibilities that you wouldn't typically see in a volunteering role. So I was given day-to-day responsibilities of the running of the organisation. This is where I also spent 8 weeks of my life in a dark room collecting data for my dissertation. So it was less than ideal circumstances for that. However, alongside all the research skills I'd gained at university and this 3-month-long internship, I still don't believe this was enough for me to get into a job in marine science. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the extra things that I think helped me along my journey. So I would never underestimate the power of a well-written CV and focused covering letter. I think it's quite important to remember that you need to be writing different CVs and covering letters depending on the role that you're applying for. And again, never underestimate the strength of a well-formatted CV and covering letter. I know in the UK, especially, the style of a CV and covering letter is quite different to something that you would find abroad. So it's important that you're looking into what's expected in those sort of things. I also worked throughout my studies, and I think, again, even though these jobs weren't necessarily relevant to the sector that I was going into, many of the skills that I gained in these jobs helped me get jobs once I'd graduated. So your typical people skills, communication, punctuality, those sort of things are all things I learned through working a normal job, which helped me get a job in marine biology once I graduated. I would also say that having knowledge of current and relevant topics that you're applying to is a key factor. So it's okay having lots of knowledge of coral reef species, but if you're applying for a job in Scotland, that's not going to get you very far. And again, networking. I think this is really important. Even when you might not see it necessary, the people that you're speaking to might be the ones that help you get a job. Someone always knows someone. So I went back to the lobster hatchery once I'd graduated as the hatchery manager. And this is where I got involved in a project called Restoration Forth, which I'm currently working on now. I faced a huge learning curve coming into this job. It was the first real full-time position that I'd had. And I'm also participating in the Young Sea Changers Scotland advocacy program to keep developing my skills. So my top tips are: be flexible, work a normal job, get those people skills, and prioritize valuable work experience over pay-to-volunteer programs. So even though sometimes these are less glamorous, at the end of the day, you want those workplace skills. Tailor your CV and cover letters and build relevant knowledge. And my email address is just there. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellery. Yeah, no, all really useful tips coming through there. I can see obviously there was similarities with what Caitlin was saying as well. And I think we've got quite a coverage of, you know, different sectors and stuff that we've got in the panel. So obviously based on that kind of first word cloud we did with Mentimeter, we know that people are here wanting to know about a few different sectors. So any questions that might have popped up for you during that, if there are specific panelists that you want to ask. So what I'd say is feel free to pop your question in the chat now, and then I'll invite you to ask the panel directly if you'd like. You can unmute yourself, or feel free to just add a note that you'd rather that I read it out. But I will just start with the one that we've already got from Shirley. So Shirley, feel free, if you would like to unmute, you can do so. But if you don't for the next 10 seconds, then I'm happy to jump on it for you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi. So yeah, as I said, I'm looking to move to the UK soon on an ancestry visa. But being from outside of the UK, there's a lot of things that obviously for the job sector, I'm kind of out of the loop on. So I, like I said in the question, I see a lot of people mentioning in job offers the SAIM and how it's important to either be working towards membership in it or already be a member of it. And I just wanted kind of to ask Annie, if she doesn't mind, to just let me know kind of how that works as a person coming from outside.
Yeah, thank you, Shirley. So we do have 7,500 members, and amongst that we do have some international members. All our events are focused in the UK in terms of member network events, conferences, but we do have that international membership. We do have a special interest group on UK overseas territories as well. What I would say, if you're at a student level or qualifying level, its membership application is very easy process. So for student, it's a simple 1-page form to complete. For qualifying, it's 2 pages. As you move up the grades, you have to evidence. We have a competency framework, which is, I would highly recommend looking at when you're looking for jobs, because it's often directly referred to in job applications, so they can be lifted straight out of there. So yeah, as I say, at this start of the career, it's very easy to become a member. Once you are a member, I would highly encourage you. We have a mentoring scheme, which it's just SciE members that volunteer their time to support people starting off in their career journeys. I think the other panelists will agree that everyone's really lovely and supportive and can remember the challenges that they faced at the start of their careers. So through that mentoring program, we match you with a mentor that has experience in what you're going through. So for example, for you, it might be someone that has come to the UK from overseas and got their position. So that is a really valuable part of your membership. So if you decide to become a member, I would highly recommend you looking in the mentoring scheme. But if you've got any questions, please feel free to get in contact. I'll put my name in the chat, my email.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you,
much. That
Shirley.
was really helpful.
Great. So we've just had another question come in directed at Ellery. So Eleanor, I don't know if you want to come on. I'll give you a couple of seconds to unmute if you'd like to. If you don't worry, I can take the question for you. Okay, perfect. So right, for Ellery then, would you say that the job that a person applies for would have to be directly related to their university degree? So I guess getting into the kind of sector that you're in at the moment, have you noticed amongst your colleagues and stuff, is everyone kind of from a marine or ecological background, or has there been a bit of diversity?
I would say that definitely the majority of people do have some sort of ecological and marine background. However, actually one of my colleagues at the Seabird Centre interestingly doesn't have a background. She didn't go to university. It was actually her work experience and volunteering that got her where she is today. So I would definitely say that the university is a really good way to be able to build those skills that a lot of these jobs are looking for. That's not necessarily the only way. And there is real strength in work experience and volunteering, where you're getting the hands-on experience in these day-to-day roles.
So just while people might be thinking of a few more questions, we do have a frequently asked questions section that I shared with the panelists prior. So I'll just lift a couple of questions from that, just as some of you might be thinking them, but don't necessarily want to ask them at the moment. So does anyone in the panel want to share any advice that they have on getting a voluntary position, or particularly anywhere to look apart from the obvious quote unquote choices such as the Wildlife Trust or National Trust, those bigger organisations? Does anyone have anything that they'd like to share about going about voluntary positions?
I can speak on that if it's helpful, since I've had a few. So yeah, I think in terms of voluntary positions, it also just depends on what you are kind of interested in and what you're prepared to do. So like, for example, with my volunteering for the Marine Conservation Society, they do different aspects that I'm involved in all of it. So they do the citizen science work where you can go out and survey seaweed. You can organise for groups to go out and do that as well, or you can participate individually. And you can organise beach cleans or participate if the MCS organises one. And they do a lot of public engagement as well. So you can go out to events and like stand at the stall and communicate about marine conservation issues, or go to schools and talk to school children about marine conservation issues as well, and engage them that way. So that's just so much diversity within one role that I do, not including the other roles that I do, like BDMLR. As a marine mammal medic, I'm trained to go out and respond to strandings of marine mammals and hopefully help to refloat them. MCS was free to participate in. You just kind of keep an eye on actually the MCS doesn't have a sort of period of time where they open up to accept volunteers. It's just a sort of ongoing thing. Whereas other voluntary organisations or organisations that have volunteer programmes like the Scottish Wildlife Trust, for example, might open up to have a young leaders cohort, which is a specific period of time that applications come in and they accept you or they can reject you, and you have to prepare like a CV, sort of similar style. MCS, you don't have to do that. You just kind of get involved if you're interested in doing it. And it's been my longest volunteer position for that reason, because it's so flexible and free to access. Things like BDM Alert, I had to pay a fee to be able to do. There's so many different organisations out there that do different things, marine stuff, terrestrial stuff, stuff with birds, stuff with bats, stuff with bugs. It's really about what you're interested in. If you'd feel comfortable doing public speaking, if that's a skill you want to develop, then look into some that will give you that experience. Others will give you more actual practical sort of surveying experience of wildlife or of kind of nature in general. And in terms of where to find it, always keep a sort of eye on the organisations like social medias and personal websites and things, because they'll have the best they'll have a section generally about how to get involved with them, whether that is a period of time that they open up for applications, whether it's courses that you undertake and then you become a volunteer, or whether you can just sign up and that's you a volunteer. The other places that I mentioned as well, particularly Conservation Careers, comes up with voluntary roles that are across the UK but also across the world. Some of these are pay to participate. Obviously, it depends on if you have the finances to be able to go and do that. And a lot of these pay to participate will be the ones that you can go and do coral reef restoration and working with sea turtles and things like that. But obviously it's not accessible to everyone. So just be wary of that. But there are kind of general websites where they have both paid jobs posted and voluntary jobs posted, and also courses on the Conservation Careers website that you can undertake to do some upskilling as well. So I know that was a bit of waffle, but there's just keep an eye on the organisations of where your interests lie, because there's so many out there that there'll be something that should cater to you.
Yeah, I think just to echo what Caitlin said, you know, I'm obviously involved with UK for Nature, but I found out about them. I set up a LinkedIn account, which I'd also highly recommend. There's all these different job forums, but I think LinkedIn is becoming more and more of like a standardized tool as well. But you can see everyone's work history. It's like a CV uploaded, and I would just notice what other people were volunteering in, and through looking at different organizations of people that were in positions I was interested in, I was able to backtrack their volunteer work and start thinking of getting involved. And I think what Caitlin said about upskilling, for example, right now I'm hosting a webinar and I can add that to my CV as something that I've done, posting social media infographics, you know, going down the communications route. So I think having a look at what different organizations are doing, how they campaign, or what skills specifically, you know, there are ones where you can contribute to databases and you can do data analytics, there's GIS mapping. So those kind of things I think are also really helpful. Anyway, I'll wrap up as well. So I think there was one other question, which I don't know if anyone from the panel can speak to, but I think it was more about the vocational route and avoiding university altogether, which I think is a really important question. It was something that I did not know about prior to going to uni. I didn't have any sort of guidance on that route. So if there is anyone in the panel that feels able to address that question or has any experience with that, that'd be great.
Thank you, I can do that. But I thought it was really interesting. I think it was Ellery and Anna both said that you actually got internships and that's how you got into your position. So that's really nice to see. Obviously, I mentioned earlier on that we commissioned that report looking at vocational pathways into nature-based green roles, and we're carrying on that work. We've had a whole series of employer workshops because we need to change attitudes from employers and also to raise awareness of the different internships. But I've noticed a big difference just in the last few years with the number of internship and apprenticeship opportunities that are available. So I think there are increasingly more apprenticeships and non-degree routes. And actually, if we're going to properly address the sort of diversity within the sector, we really need to open up. So there shouldn't be an expectation that it has to be a graduate route. That has traditionally been the case, but for a lot of the positions, you do not need to go to university to be able to get those positions. So there's a bit of attitude changing, and it will take time. But as I say, we are working with the sort of key organisations looking at developing different apprenticeships as well into nature-based roles. So there is a section on the Green Jobs for Nature website. You might want to have a look at Eleanor for that. But yeah, if you've got any questions, get in touch.
Yeah, so I think so far there's no other kind of questions coming through. So I thought I might quickly just open up to panel. I obviously know you had short 5-minute sections. So just before we wrap up, I didn't know if anyone had any kind of final thing that they would really like to share with people that are on this job journey hunt, and yeah, anything that you feel like you might have quickly skipped over that you think could be really useful. If not, don't worry, I can wrap up from there. But I thought it was worth just letting you have a final say. Cool. Well, I think everyone feels like they covered it then. Perfect. So like we said, you can check out the Green Jobs for Nature website. There'll be even more stuff there. Voice Academy as well, I know, post a lot of really useful resources about upskilling, and obviously a few of the panelists have shared their contact details in the chat as well. So you know, I definitely take people up on that offer if people share their contact details. I think it's so great to get in touch and get that more personalized feedback or that personalized advice. It's really helped me in my search at the moment. And I think I'll end it on what Shirley actually just contributed into the chat as well, that you can get rejected quite a lot and it can feel really, really demotivating. But it's all these kind of tips and tricks that help you along the way. And I think, as you said, hearing from the panel, that everyone has got different barriers that they've faced, whether it's being landlocked, whether it's coming from a low income background, whether it's experiencing burnout from trying to juggle too many things at once. I think the key message is just have a look out for those upskilling opportunities, and particularly the meeting people opportunities. I think the more people in the roles that you're trying to get into that you meet, the more the chance they get to know you personally. The more fulfilled you'll feel and the more excited about those kind of roles, but hopefully the more support you'll get in return as well. But yeah, feel free to check out UK Youth for Nature as well and see if you'd like to get involved in any of their work. Again, the volunteering hours it's completely free to join, and the volunteering hours are completely up to you as well. So if that's one that you'd be interested in, there's a lot of opportunities going on with them at the moment as well. But I just want to say one really final massive thank you to all the panelists who've shared their time with us, and really hope everyone found something useful out of it. And if there's any follow-up questions, feel free to get in touch with Annie or myself. I'll just put my email in there as well now, if you did want to get in touch with me as well. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And I think we'll leave it there.
Thank you all.
Thank you.